Okay, are we live? Whoops. All right. Welcome to the Minstrel slash stroke style workshop for breakthrough banjo members. Um, so I'm getting started a little bit early on this one. I may have to cut it short. We will see. If I do, I will come back for the second part later on, but hopefully I won't have to do that. So this workshop, as advertised, is going to be introducing you to minstrel style banjo. And I'll talk in a sec about what that is. I think probably the best way to get into it is to first show you an example of minstrel style banjo. This is a song that I posted as a tune of the week a while back, and is one that I will review in this particular workshop. It's called the Callow Hill Jig, and let's see, here it is. Okay, so that was the song Callow Hill Jig. A really pretty minstrel song, minstrel tune. And so I'm holding here a gigantic minstrel style banjo. If you don't find yourself in possession of a gigantic minstrel style banjo, do not fear. I'm actually going to be showing you or demonstrating this style on a modern steel strung banjo, because I imagine more people will have access to those than minstrel banjos, or ones that accommodate the lower tunings, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you can play all of the material of minstrel banjo on a regular modern steel strung banjo. You'll just be tuning to a different key, and I'll show you that in a minute. So first things first. Just as an overview, what I'm going to do here is just kind of give you an overview of what minstrel style is, especially the parts of it that are unique compared to clawhammer or frailing banjo, what we're typically used to, and introduce you to some of the core techniques of minstrel banjo through a couple of tunes. So, first of all, why would we want to learn this, or why would we be interested in it? Well, a couple reasons. First of all, it introduces an entirely new repertoire of music. So the minstrel era, was in the late 19th century. It was basically the rock and roll of its time. Tons of great music was written for that era. And so if you're able to play the techniques of minstrel style banjo, then you can play that music as well. Also, simply learning it, just like I've talked about before, learning any other genre or technique really opens the door to more music that you're able to make on your banjo. So there are some techniques of minstrel banjo that you can adapt even for just playing your regular stuff that you'd play clawhammer. And what you will see if you dabble around in this style is that a lot of melodic style clawhammer banjo is really just minstrel banjo techniques that were rebranded as melodic, but all of the stuff that we clawhammer players use to try to get all of the notes of a fiddle tune are techniques that were already around at the time of minstrel banjo. And so it's really just a form of melodic clawhammer with some extra stuff done that we don't typically do these days. So just as a review, the minstrel banjo comes from the minstrel era in the late 19th century in the U.S. And was super popular in its time. So you had people who were touring all over the country, here and abroad, and it was the pop music of its time. So super popular. Obviously, it was a music of its time, both in the music itself and in the way it was performed, and influenced by the culture of the time. And so, all of the messiness of the banjo tradition is part of the minstrel era. So I think these days we want to preserve the best of that stuff and keep the tradition alive without taking with it all of the extra baggage. Ultimately, this is all downstroke banjo. So minstrel banjo is all played the same way we clawhammers play with the back of our nail, playing melody notes and the thumb, playing fifth string and sometimes dropping in to other strings, there are, or I should say that this was the style itself. The first minstrel players learned this from slaves who had brought this style from Africa and the Caribbean. And so it was really sort of the first instance of this technique for the banjo sort of adapted to play more European sounding melodies and tunes. And as far as the differences between minstrel and what we normally think of as typical clawhammer and frailing banjo goes, I think of there kind of being three major differences worth knowing about. One there are certain techniques that are used to play minstrel songs that you don't really see, or that we don't use much in clawhammer banjo. There's also the banjos themselves. So like I said, the typical banjos were of this kind. This is a reproduction Boucher style banjo made by Terry Bell that I have here. A great banjo. I don't know if he's still making these, but if he is, I'd highly recommend them. They're very reasonably priced and sound amazing. So they're the banjos that accommodate these longer scales, either nylon or gut strings, and the tuning is about 5 half steps below what we would normally tune a modern strung banjo to. So you get those low, deeper tones. You can also play this on a gourd banjo, so that's another option, and typically even cheaper. So I've got that one tuned to a minstrel tuning as well. And so there's the banjos themselves. Like I said, you don't have to use a minstrel banjo. You can use a regular banjo and play these same tunes. And then the third significant difference is the tuning. So most of the minstrel tunes are written in in the equivalent of what we would refer to as drop C tuning these days, which is G, C, G, B, D. So standard G with the fourth string lowered from a D to a C, which typically a tuning used to play in the key of C. Clawhammerists these days tend to use double C more often, but this tuning also works for playing in C. So another advantage of this is you get to familiarize yourself with this tuning. This is also the tuning that Charlie Poole played all of his tunes in. So the banjos, a few techniques that we'll talk about, and then the tuning are the major differences between minstrel and clawhammer, and the rest is the same. So many of the techniques obviously are exactly the same between both styles. So essentially everything that's done in minstrel banjo is also done in clawhammer, However, there are some minstrel techniques that aren't commonly used these days in clawhammer, but as I said, they are very useful to know, in my opinion. Let's see, that's I think I covered what I wanted to there. So I'm going to show you around some of these techniques and demonstrate them in the course of a song. Let's see, I mentioned that the banjos are different. Let me bring my other modern banjo out. So, like I said, the tuning is, let me grab my tuner. The tuning is the same as is drop C. So on a modern banjo, it's GCGBD. By the way, let me show you here the handout, which is in the which is in the virtual classroom below this video. You can download it, and a talk. It has the tunings in there and the tunes that we're going to cover. So these are the, oops. So these are the tunings up there, as you see. So the on a modern banjo, whoops, I should say not pre-modern, but modern on the bottom, GCGBD. If you're using one of a gourd or minstrel banjo, I typically do the Briggs tuning, D, G, D, F sharp, A. The Rice tuning is E, A, E, G sharp, B, just 2 half steps difference. So Briggs tuning will put your tunes in the key of G typically, and Rice tuning in the key of A. And then if you're playing on a modern banjo, your tunes are going to be in the key of C. That's really the major difference. Okay. All right, let me see if I had anything more to say about that. Yeah, as you're gonna, as I mentioned already, the main things with the techniques, or the technique of minstrel banjo, is that there's a lot of overlap between minstrel banjo and what we nowadays call melodic clawhammer banjo, and that's because the aim of a minstrel banjo player was to play all of the melody notes, whereas in some clawhammer styles these days, depending on how rhythmic or melodic you want to be, you may drop some of those melody notes in favor of the rhythm. Melody was probably as or more important than maintaining a particular rhythm in these minstrel banjo songs, so they were always trying to get melody notes. And so that means that in addition to getting the melody notes with the trailing finger like we're used to, they commonly use alternate string pull-offs, or pull-offs in general, but alternate string pull-offs too, to get melody notes. So using the fingers of the picking hand to get melody notes. The thumb is frequently used on the inside string, so they're dropping their thumb all the time. And the thumb is often played, or the melody is often played on the 5th string, so they use the 5th string for melody notes. And sometimes we'll even play the 5th string on the down and upbeats. So we've talked about before, typically in regular clawhammer, frailing, whatever you want to call it, the thumb is played on the offbeats. Here, that can shift sometimes to the thumb being played on the down and upbeat. And probably the biggest single sort of aesthetic difference between minstrel and regular clawhammer is that in regular clawhammer, we rarely break the basic stroke, right? We're always just going for that driving rhythm. And it's very common to break that in minstrel style banjo. Again, you're really focusing on getting the melody notes with the hand, and that'll be clear as we work through some of these songs. The rhythms themselves are also a little bit more formal sounding. This was performance music, not necessarily dance music, which is really a lot of the clawhammer frailing tradition that we know these days was born out of dance music. So really that's where that rhythm is such an important element. So it's less so because this was performance music. All right, so let me first check for any questions, and then I will go to the exercises. So during the era of minstrel banjo, there were several books or tutors or whatever you want to call them that were written to show people how to do it. So some of the most prominent minstrel banjo players of the day wrote these little instruction manuals, and they're actually wonderful. If you go to Tim Twiss's website, you can actually download those old tutorials, and they're really cool. Again, they were trying to convey how to play this style purely on the written page, which you can imagine is pretty challenging, but it's pretty an impressive effort that they made to do so. And so each of those books usually had a set of exercises for getting started. And I'm going to show you some of the exercises from the Briggs book. So some of the exercises you don't need to do because you already play clawhammer, so you know how to strike the string and so forth. But I'm going to go for cover a few of the few exercises that introduce some elements that you may not be as familiar with. So again, and these are in your handout. So let's go to the first set of exercises. Let's see if I can pull it up. There we go. Okay, so these are from the Briggs book, and I'm going to move to the, actually, let's first get in tune. So just to make sure we're all on the same page. So we're going to play G, C, G, B, D tuning. So C on the fourth, G on the third, B on the second, D on the first, and G on the fifth. Now, that's not an open tuning. So for those who aren't as familiar with this tuning, your kind of home chord is the C major chord, and you're going to be using this a lot. So you have your index on the first fret of the second string, ring is on the second fret of the first string, and the rest are open. Just like a C major shape in standard G, except you're not fretting the fourth fret. And then similarly, the F major shape is like your F shape in standard G tuning, but you're not fretting the fourth string again. So you have your middle on the third string, second fret, index on the first string, second fret, pinky on the third string, first fret. That's your F major. So these two positions, C and F major, you're going to get a lot. And then your G would be you're fretting your second fret of your fourth string. Okay, so those are the chord shapes you'll be seeing a lot. Okay, now here is our first exercise, all right? And again, going through these, I'm going to use this blue box to show you which exercise which measure I'm working on. So I'll play through this, and then I'll go over it. So easy enough, right? First measure. We're just alternating our picking finger and our thumb. Next measure. Like that. Third measure, and then last measure. So pretty straightforward. So we would call this double thumbing in contemporary terms, right? All right, now, here's another little figure. Whoops, I deleted something accidentally here. Okay, here's another little figure, common little rhythm. Now we're going to be dropping our thumb to the second string. So I'm going to play through this one. So first measure here. Okay, and again I'm in that C major shape now. Open strings. So again, just dropping. Second note is that drop thumb. All right, and then the third measure here. And then same thing. All right, so again, these are the little exercises that were in the beginning of these tutorial books for getting you kind of ready for the basic rhythms. Let's see. Let me. One of these got cut off here. See if I can fix this. Hold on one second. Want this exercise to occupy all of the screen here. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we've got our, let me fix this so you can see all of it. Oops. Okay, next exercise here. So now we're starting with this F chord. All right. Actually, sorry, we're not starting with F chord. We're just going to go, we're starting with that C major chord, but we're going to go to that 3rd fret. So here's that first measure. Next measure. Again, same rhythm as the last exercise. So again. All right, next exercise. Here we're going to start getting into some different territory. All right, here's where we start getting these triplet rhythms that are so common, but which we don't really do in clawhammer. So, okay, so the first measure, next measure, next measure, and last measure. All right, a little bit different than what we're used to. Now, for the last set of exercises, okay, play through this one. So first measure, next measure, sorry, next measure, last one. Okay, so those are those exercises for kind of getting yourself warmed up. Now let's move to a tune. Okay, this is, let's see, this is Briggs' corn shucking jig. Because everybody needs a jig for shucking corn to. That is the Briggs corn shucking jig. Here we're starting to sound a little different than our usual clawhammer material. Let me move it over. There it is. Okay, so that's the beginning of the Briggs corn shucking jig that I just played. So let's go through it measure by measure. As you could probably tell, that is it's a 3-part tune. So we will go over each part. They're short. So that begins like this. Okay. Nothing too difficult there, all just down hammer strokes. Now, in this measure, we've got this. So we've got those triplet. Triplet. That's the part that's going to be different than usual. And then this next measure, all familiar material. Last one. And so you're going to be on that last measure, coming down onto that C major chord to get that second string at the first fret. So everything at the top sounds like this. Okay, and then there's a repeat there, so you'd play that one again. All right? Now, next, we have some just strumming that we're gonna do. So there's a lot of options here, and I think one of the traditions in minstrel banjo was to do all sorts of flourishes and inventive things during these types of parts. So you can do all sorts of fancy hand motions to make it look extra dramatic. By the way, this tune was first taught to me by Greg Adams, who is a phenomenal minstrel banjo player, an expert on the style. I'd highly recommend seeking out his material and his videos if you're interested in learning more about it. He taught me this years ago. Basically, you just do 4 strums here. But if you want to get fancy, you could go strum down and then strum up with the back of your thumb. So whatever you want to do there. So I'll only play through this whole part. Okay, so the first 4 measures again, just 4 strums. All right, next measure, like before. Okay, then we've got next ones. All right, and as I mentioned, I may have had to cut this one short. So I will pause here, and I will return in a little while, maybe about an hour and a half, to resume this workshop and pick up and finish this tune, and then teach you one more.